to just pause. There's so much on our heart this year and in this moment. Proverbs says, if your enemy falls, do not exult. If he trips, let your heart not rejoice. I've been reminding myself of this verse, but I must admit that my own emotional response to Israel's strategic, planned, and precise attack on Hezbollah over the past 2 weeks has left me with some sense of schadenfreude. I'm not proud of that, but it is true. This is day 361 of our hostages being held and Hamas's pillage of southern Israel, day 361 of the war in Gaza. Adine Steinsaltz expands on the verse from Proverbs by teaching such a reaction is immoral. There is no legitimate justifications for happiness over someone's sad fate. And furthermore, such rejoicing can be counterproductive. Do not rejoice in your enemy's fall, he says. God does not want people to rejoice over the failure and suffering of others. Judaism gives us a moral voice to guide us through brutal times. I do not have any sense that Hamas or Hezbollah or other enemies of Israel have any misgivings about rejoicing over their attacks about Israel, though. I stand here unsure of the right words or the perfect message. I am not a military analyst or a political commentator. I'm a rabbi, pained by this past year, heartbroken and fearful for my friends and family in Israel, and resolute in my connection with Medinat Yisrael. I will speak from the heart. I love Israel. I love the land, I love the people, I love the history. Israel is not just a topic of interest for me. Israel is not an op-ed or a chapter in a history book. For me, Israel is not a fad to rally for or protest against. Israel is a part of me. It is in my blood, in the air I breathe. Israel is in my dreams, and it shapes my vision for tomorrow. I am proud to be part of the Jewish people. I am proud to be a Zionist. I am not here to convince you or assuage you. It has been 361 days since Hamas's ruthless attack on Israel with the sole intent of murder and sexual violence, kidnapping, looting, and to draw Israel into the trap that it is in now. I stand here within the paradox of the heart. It can be broken and simultaneously overflowing with pride, resolve, and resilience. You will likely disagree with me at moments of this talk, and other parts may resonate with you. Regardless, I invite you to coffee to discuss and struggle and to love Israel together. So why do I love Israel so much? I didn't originally choose to be part of the Jewish people in the same way that you don't choose your parents. Being Jewish is one of the greatest gifts my parents have given me, though. My parents' first trip to Israel was in 1975. I was 5 years old. I have a picture of my mom on the tarmac at Ben Gurion Airport with the El Al 747 behind her. Fellow passengers are coming down the staircase. My mom is posing for my dad, who I assume is taking the picture. There is another photo of my parents riding a camel. My mom is on top with my dad behind her on the camel's rump. And their smiles are bright. My first trip to Israel was about a decade later on a teen trip. It transformed me. On that trip, I realized that this teen kid from California was part of a much, much larger story. I understood that being part of the Jewish people is a horizontal and vertical connection to fellow Jews, contemporaneous and across time. Being Jewish, being part of the Jewish people, I would never stand alone. A few years later, I stood at the gravesite of countless Jews at Majdanek concentration camp, and it became clear to me that while we bicker amongst ourselves in the Jewish community, Orthodox, conservative, Reform, European, Sephardic, Kitniot, not Kitniot, patrilineal, matrilineal, in the eyes of the world, we are all the same. And at moments we are lifted up together, and at other times we are buried indiscriminately together. We are one people, whether we like it or not. Growing up in the 80s, I knew right where I stood. I had to just look at popular culture. Everything was Jewish. Seinfeld and Friends and Adam Sandler and Dr. Ruth and Ratners and Zabars, everything was Jewish. Franklin Fowler captures a sense that change was afoot right under us, though. His article in The Atlantic is titled "The End of the Golden Age." The ground shifted from the political right and the political left. An unfamiliar paradigm seemed to be emerging in relation to the place of American Jews and Israel. In 2017, Richard Spencer's Charlottesville Unite the Right rally and Linda Sasour's Women's March on Washington occurred months apart, only about 100 miles away from each other. They were signs of change. In a lecture at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem this summer, Rabbi Ed Feinstein gave full voice that what we are experiencing now is a paradigm shift. The golden age has turned. Our burden now is to define the next framework for loving Judaism and loving Israel. In other words, as Dan Libenson and Lex Rofberg of Judaism Unbound says, maybe Judaism, American Judaism, needs a new operating system. Maybe we hold on to such diverse assumptions. We need a new way of seeing what holds us together. As just one example of this fissure, my son recently told me the story of one of his friends. She is active on campus in protests, and her grandmother is not. This is a perfect example of the intense tensions between divergent paradigms. Admittedly, I do not know the family details or the positions of my son's friend, but the grandmother has disavowed her granddaughter over her positions on Israel. The grandmother's health is now failing, he told me, and my son was unsure if they would be able to repair this rupture before the grandmother passed away. I'm afraid of what we are doing to ourselves. As unsettling as this time of change is, Feinstein asserts what happens to be that we happen to be really good at paradigm shifts. Despite our fierce loyalty to tradition, over time there have been disruptions in our history. We have needed to reinterpret our values, re-articulate our narratives, and reinvent our institutions and reconfigure our sense of mission in the world. Feinstein jokes that this is precisely when Jews write books. The first temple is destroyed, and we write the Book of Prophets. The second temple is destroyed, and we write the Mishnah and later the Talmud. The rise of Arabic philosophy in Spain, and Maimonides writes the Mishnah Torah and the Guide for the Perplexed. The Reconquista prompts the mystical tradition. He says, as much as we are committed to tradition, it is these moments of discontinuity that really shapes the Jewish tradition. Discontinuity feels like a generous term for the moment we are in. But it also gives me hope because we have been here before and we found our footing anew. A shift can be seen across American Jewish communities. People's affiliation with traditional institutions of the community has changed. Synagogues, JCCs, federations. People own their own sense of creating Jewish ritual in different ways. Call it DIY Judaism, if you will. There has been a shift away from God and towards spirituality. Arnie Eisen's description of the sovereign self rings true. Jews walk through the world deciding for themselves what is meaningful, rather than what is obligated by an experience at Mount Sinai. And of course, our model of relationship with Israel has shifted over the past decades. I grew up with Israel being David, and Goliath was the 22 surrounding Arab countries at war with Israel. In the past years, many now see Israel as Goliath and Palestinians as David. It is a reductionist construct, but if one must be David, the other must be the hated giant, I guess. But how misconstrued and narrow that idea is. I believe both Israel and Palestinians are operating from a position of trauma, both feeling like victims, claiming to be righteous fighters and overcoming oppression. Palestinians see themselves as victims of Israel. Israel sees itself as victims to or vulnerable to Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas and Houthis and others. The last 48 hours have reinforced Israel's concern for Iran's threat as Iran fired over 180 ballistic missiles at Israel. And for the second time, the attack was thwarted because of the close U.S.-Israel relationship. Competing paradigms have emerged for American Jews about Israel. One manifestation are the anti-Zionists who took over some college campuses. People joined protests filled with hate and promoted anti-Jewish violence. Jews having sit-ins in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda calling for arms embargoes of Israel, making charges of genocide against Israel, and delegitimizing Israel by making false claims of colonial origins. This is one paradigm that is active now. And I have sat with some of these people to listen, to hear their perspectives, to try to understand and articulate my bright lines. Because if your goal is to dismantle Israel, if you are advocating that Israel should not exist, this is not just a disagreement of perspective. We have fundamentally different value systems. If you are advocating for a better Israel in the full breadth of what that might mean to you, then we have a lot to talk about and likely much common ground. See, I am part of a different paradigm. I was raised defending Israel's right to protect itself. I knew that Israel was created out of the retreat of the Ottoman and British empires, not created by them. I knew that Zionism is the aspiration of Jewish self-determination and was not a movement for oppressing others. I know I can protest the abhorrence of settler violence as I push Israel to be a better version of itself. I grew up believing the words of Israel's Declaration of Independence, which, while as yet not fully realized, expresses the intent of Israel's founders. It says, Israel will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all of its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom and justice and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all of the inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. I believe the people of Israel continue to aspire for this. I believe the Jewish people continue to pray for this. Just like America has not yet fulfilled the values of our founding documents, Israel has not either. And I am not willing to give up on America or Israel. We have divergent models today. I've been thinking about Passover and the Haggadah. Specifically, the Arba Banim, the four sons, the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, and the son that doesn't know how to ask. I want to look more closely at the one characterized as the wicked son. What is his question? The wicked son asks, what does this ritual mean to you? And we all know that the Haggadah chastises this child. He is called the wicked son after all. The rabbis of the Haggadah accuse him of separating himself from the Jewish people by saying, what does this mean to you and not to us? The Haggadah says, because he has excluded himself from the community, he has committed heresy, and even goes further to reprimand the wicked son by saying that if he had been in Egypt, he would not have been redeemed from slavery. We know the story. One way the fractures within our community is manifest is by how the Ahavat Yisrael group, of which I am a part, responds to the anti-Zionist group. It has been generally in the Haggadah mode with rebuke and disgust. And when I have seen the heinous slogans and chants at some of these protests, when I heard justifications for October 7 as an act of Palestinian liberation, I felt disgust and fear that this is emerging from within our own Jewish community, as well as being instigated by outsiders. In this binary scenario, it feels like those making charges of genocide have become the persona of the wicked child. It feels like they have removed themselves from the Jewish people, though they would not describe themselves that way at all. I have heard both sides say, we are better without them. We, the traditional lovers of Israel, are better off without Jewish Israel haters. Or we, the ones who shout not in our name, are better off without Israel. As a lover of Israel and a lover of the Jewish people, the rift is real. The abyss is painful. There are competing and divergent paradigms. And even though we know this story so well, the Torah gives us a different answer than the Haggadah, actually. The wicked son's verse, what does this mean to you, comes from Exodus. But the Torah does not treat the child as wicked like the Haggadah does centuries later. In the Torah, the verse is used expecting younger generations to ask questions and for the elders to have meaningful engagement in response. And when your children asks, the Exodus says, when your children ask you, what does this ritual mean to you, you shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to God who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt, smiting the Egyptians, but saving our houses. V'amartem zevach Pesach, and you will tell them it is the Passover sacrifice. To the same question, what does this ritual mean to you? The Torah's response is matter of fact. It is within dialogue. It is far different than the Haggadah. The Torah understands that future generations will ask why you do things. What does it mean to you? And then what can it mean to me? Unlike the Haggadah's harshness and defensiveness, the Torah expects children to ask. The Torah knows we must be prepared to offer a clear, meaningful, and relevant response to them. The Torah does not shun the son who asks, but embraces him. The Torah, unlike the Haggadah, invites them in. I'm deeply afraid of what we have done to ourselves by shunning those who have been asking legitimate questions about Israel, because those people are now mixed in with groups making illegitimate claims and accusations. The bright line is that Israel exists as a Jewish democratic nation, and I am prepared to struggle with you in hard conversations together about the makeup and character and future of Israel. That is what it means to love, for me, to love Israel. But I will not give space for those who want to destroy Israel. As we disagree with each other, we cannot dismiss each other. Our fractures only make Hamas and our enemies stronger. Here's the rub. As we in America are arguing and debating and castigating each other about human rights and the morality of just war and shouting claims to own the mantle of the Shoah to explain why we defend ourselves or why we should limit our response, Hamas does not care about any of those things. Hamas is not a liberation movement or caring government of its own people. It is bent on destroying Israel. After all, Hamas murdered 6 hostages rather than letting them go free. They built their tunnels under neighborhoods so the innocent human cost would be highest. Hamas built command centers under schools and UNRWA sites so the news would report apparent Israeli malfeasance rather than military infrastructure embedded in civilian areas. If your enemy falls, do not exult. If he trips, let your heart not rejoice. Too many people have died. And we pray for peace because we know war is horrible. We pray for a Sukkot Shlomecha, a shelter of peace, because war is devastating. Rabbi Eric Yaffe, the former head of the Reform movement, says, Jewish life cannot be sustained without Israel at its core. And Israel cannot be sustained without the Jewish people at its side. So the notion that either of us could survive without the other is an absurdity. Together, we are a single people. We are the heirs of a great civilization. We are implicated in each other's fate and destiny, and while disagreeing is fine, distancing is not. In a time of pain and fear and love, we need each other. We should not separate ourselves from the pain which is happening. The Talmud teaches when the Jewish people is immersed in distress and one separates himself from the community so he doesn't share the suffering, the two ministering angels who accompany a person come and place their hands on his head as though he was a sacrifice. And they say, this person has separated himself from the community. Let him not see the rebuilding of it. But, it continues, anyone who is distressed together with the community will merit to see the rebuilding of the community. We are in a time of distress, and we must find a way to stand together with Israel. We cannot dismiss each other. We must find a new paradigm for being in love with Israel. We do not have to agree, but we cannot distance ourselves from each other or from Israel. This is the challenge of the paradigm shift we are experiencing. In this new mold, we need to find fresh language of loving Israel. We need to re-articulate how being Jewish is being part of an ancient countercultural movement designed, as the adage says, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. We need to reimagine what the world looks like when we are obligated to each other and not solely our own pursuits. Israel is a part of me. It is in my blood, in the air that I breathe. Israel is in my dreams, and it shapes my vision for tomorrow. I am proud to be a Zionist, to be a lover of Israel. We must create the next paradigm. The golden age is behind us, and our future can be even brighter in America and in Israel. I believe we have a particular talent for this type of ideological renewal. We have a particular spiritual resilience and cultural creativity. It is built into our DNA. Or as Ed Feinstein said, to put it in more religious terms, God is not done with us yet. We will not be defeated by Israel's enemies at its borders or here. As Jews, we will not cower in fear as we push anti-Semitism back to the margins of society. And I know together we are up for this challenge because we don't have any other choice. May the new year be one of renewal and peace for us and all of the children of Abraham. Am Yisrael Chai, Shana Tova.